Well, Nepal has asked for its treaty, the 1950 treaty with India, to be revised. Now, this, of course, comes at a time when India and Nepal have had tense equations, have had tense ties for a few years now, owing to multiple things, the latest, of course, being a dispute over boundaries. Nayanima Basu, who tracks diplomacy for The Print, has joined us today. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it face to face like we do government matters now, but anyway, she's there. So she's joined us, which is good enough. Noinima, thank you for joining us. I know you have limitations today, but thank you for taking out time. Uh, Also, our viewers, this is a live episode as always, so do send in your questions on this issue. So, Noinima, I know we keep talking about the 1950 Indo-Nepal treaty, but a lot of us are not really aware of what the treaty says and what are the core points of the treaty. So, if you can first talk about that before going on to then discuss why Nepal wants this revised.
Well, thank you, Ruhi, for this episode. Well, the treaty basically is all about, if you really think about it over the years since it was signed in 1950, it was all about open borders, having a friendly relationship, and not really viewing each other with suspicion. We don't really have. I mean, we on our western side, we don't have a friendly neighbor, is what we've been always hearing, and we know. So Nepal, there's been a special relationship. There's been people to people linkages, there's been historical linkages, cultural linkages. So there was this understanding that was reached in 1950 that let's have open borders, let's not have visas while we travel in each other's country. Let our investors especially come and invest as much as they want in both the countries. Let be a free movement of people. But as we know, and I'm sure viewers will be asking this question, is to the fact that this has now been a hot subject of debate within Nepal, and the fact that they're not really saying there's any issue with it. All they want is that it should be revised to reflect the realities of contemporary times.
So, what are these realities of contemporary times that Nepal wants reflected? I mean, what kind of changes are they asking for?
See, this was always under sort of discussion in Nepal, and there was a lot of debate happening for last almost a decade now. But then, when Prime Minister Modi came to power in 2014 and he visited Nepal, and you remember what a fantastic trip that was. It was a very popular visit. People of Nepal welcomed him very warmly. So at that time, in the joint statement, there was this understanding that, not really particularly talking about the treaty, but then there was this understanding that let's create a group of eminent persons. So it was called EPG, Eminent Persons Group, in which from both the sides that will create a report in terms of the fact that with the objective of how the relationship can be elevated from what it is now to basically upgradation of ties, right? And
Right.
that's where one of the features and one of the proposals, I would say, that came from Nepal's side very prominently in the report is that of revising this treaty. Now, with this report also, there's a lot of controversy going on. Nepal says that India has not really, accepted or adopted the report. I mean, both sides had to make that report. The report is finalized. It has to be submitted to respective prime ministers. It seems that in from Nepal's side, it has been submitted to Prime Minister Oli, whereas from Indian side, it seems it has not been submitted yet to Prime Minister Modi. So it was very prominently featured there. And if you go by some of the local reports in Nepal, in the Nepali media, they say that India is not adopting this report or it's not being submitted to India's prime minister is because it talks about a revision of the 1950 treaty. That's one of the reasons that they cite.
Right. So, Nayanima, we know Nepal's foreign minister was here on a 3-day visit. What are the big takeaways from the visit? How was his meeting with External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar?
So the meeting went off well. I mean, the points that both sides had to discuss, they did. After all, it was a joint commission meeting, which was it is the highest dialogue mechanism that you have right after the level of the prime ministers. And so there was a lot of apprehension also last year, as you can remember, when ties were really, really strained because of the fact that Nepal had issued a new political map claiming some of the disputed regions in the the India-Nepal border as part of their territory. So a lot of discussions at that time were happening that maybe the Joint Commission meeting will not take place. India will refuse to do so. But then we saw that by the last quarter, I would not say quarter, but the last few months of 2020, from October, November, December, India did a lot of high-level visits from the RAW chief, then foreign secretary, army chief was also there. And that's when, all this paved the way for foreign secretary, the foreign minister coming to Nepal. So all issues were discussed. This issue was also taken up. That's what the foreign minister of Nepal tells the media in his select media meeting, is that India needs to discuss the 1950 treaty, and that is something we are, looking forward to.
Right. So, Nayanima, let's talk a little bit about the domestic political turmoil in Nepal, which has been hitting headlines for the past couple of months, for a while now, but it reached a peak when Prime Minister Oli decided to dissolve the lower house of parliament. So, what's happening there? Have things stabilized a little bit, and is that impacting talks with India in any way?
Well, if you remember, Ruhi, in fact, we did one of your government affairs, the government matters episode on this, on the political turmoil in Nepal. So the issue here is what Nepal says, that yes, in all practical purposes, the ruling party of NCP, that is the Nepal Communist Party, it is split in these two factions, right? One faction headed by Prime Minister Oli and the other by Madhav Kumar Nepal and Pushp Dahal, who's they both are former prime ministers of Nepal. But then when it comes to, and right now there is a sort of caretaker government, because they have taken the case on the dissolution of the lower house of the parliament to their Supreme Court, and there are these talks also happening that the Prime Minister Oli will go ahead with elections, in April, May. So there's a contention there also. The other side, they do not want any sort of election, but that's what Foreign Minister Gewali told us, the Indian media, that the elections will go ahead. However, when it comes to their relationship with other countries, be it India, be it China, be it the US, with whom Nepal is now trying to make a lot of robust relationship. When it comes to those external relationship, then they will be seen as this one party, one united country, because what they say is that when it comes to our internal political problems, we'll sort it on our own. But for now, we are going to go ahead and show the world, and in policy matters, we will be one. Because remember, these two factions have claimed the party symbol as well as the party flag also. So that's another matter that's there.
Right. Okay. This viewer called Thausen has a question, or user ID called Thausen. What exactly is this treaty? Now, I know you've explained what the 1950 treaty is about and what it entails, but what is now India's stand on the treaty?
So if you really take a look back on what's been happening with the treaty, is that India never really talked about revising this treaty or any problem with that treaty. In fact, when all these problems with the Nepal had started on the boundary issue, on their issuance of the map issue, even at that point of time, not once did the government, especially the Ministry of External Affairs, ever talked about the fact that we would like to revise or revoke or sort of cancel the 1950 Friendship Treaty. In fact, it was on the contrary. It's when the Indian government was constantly saying that Nepal should always look at this treaty and realize the fact that how India views Nepal as its friend, as a friendly neighbor. Having said that, it is also true that what Nepal thinks is that it is basis on this treaty, India has always sort of interfered in the internal matters of Nepal, not really given them the freedom to think independently. And whenever there's been this aspect of China coming into the picture, India has always called it interference. So these are some of the things that Nepal, in today's Nepal, things are changing. That's what Foreign Minister Gewali also stated, that, we need to revise this treaty to give an answer to our future generations, a generation which is now, they are all, most of them are in Western countries having Western education. They are standing up and questioning that why should we always depend on either India or China? We need to have our own sovereign identity.
Right. Okay, Bhuvnesh, is Kalapani really a part of Nepal? So you can answer that, and then let's talk a little bit about. I mean, Nayanima, can you answer that? But after that, let's talk a little bit about the boundary dispute and what sort of resolution is being looked at.
Mhm. Well, that's an interesting question. That's one question as the media we were also posing to Prime Minister, Foreign Minister Gewali time and again whenever we got a chance to meet him. But then, for them, it's not really, and he never had this kind of an approach to the fact that now that we are done with the map issue, we'll not discuss anything with India. So they have not really done that, and India is also aware of that. And he stated very clearly in his address to the ICWA, where he gave one speech, is that both sides have decided that they will come to a resolution. They will discuss this matter. Uh, However, well, I cannot really directly say Kalapani belongs to
Yeah,
whom.
that's what I said. Can you answer that question?
That's right. So that's for both countries to decide what they want to do. But for now, Nepal has gone ahead and claimed around 335 square kilometers in the Kalapani, Limpiadhura, and Lipu Lake areas. But what Nepal says that, uh, where India calls it unilateral move, it is not an unilateral move. It is something we did as a consequence to what India did in November 2019 when India came up with its own version of a new political map. Remember, we did that after
Right.
the abrogation of Article 370. So that sort of upset them. They said that there's a foreign secretary level dialogue mechanism that was set up in 2014. In fact, Prime Minister Modi had stated that when he went there in Nepal. So
Okay.
their contention is this foreign secretary level dialogue never sort of took place. Not a single round has happened. So they're open to dialogue and they're open to discuss the matter.
Okay.
So is India.
Ankur has a related question about how much of the land is a dispute between the two countries. So you mentioned the Kalapani area and the Lipu Lake area.
Well, that's right. Even the quantity of the land, how much is under dispute, that's also not clear. There are various maps. Yeah, in the 1980s, a joint committee was set up to map those areas, but then only this area, the Kalapani region, and there's also the region of Susta, that in Bihar, that these two areas were never mapped. So nobody knows the exact measurement of land that is still under dispute. And Susta is still very much on the radar that needs to be settled, that area. But what Nepal has claimed in Kalapani region is about 335 square kilometers as per their own media reports.
Right. Okay. Ankit, how much of a role has the blockade of Nepal played in worsening the India-Nepal relationship, and how much is the truth in the blockade incident? So, of course, they're talking about when the Madhesi agitation was happening, and India was seen to have backed the blockade, the Terai region.
Well, that's right, Ruhi. Remember, that was one, I would call it a dark episode in India Nepal relationship. That's when India sort of, nobody knows whom to blame, but Nepal blames India for all practical purposes. The Madhesi agitation happened because they promulgated their constitution, and the Madhesi population were not given adequate
Right.
representation.
Right.
So, but at that time, and that was Prime Minister Oli was then at that time, that was his the first time that he came in. His previous sort of when he became the prime minister, he had assured that yes, Nepal will go ahead and give them the representation, the constitution will be worked out. So a lot of technical talks were going on. However, as a result of the border blockade, India did not even give them essential commodities like food and medicine and all those things. So
Right.
it's not that India intended to do so, but that's how the border blockade turned quite an ugly chapter, I would say. And that created a lot of, I would say, anti-India sentiments happened in Nepal. And I would say that the present dispensation in Nepal really took advantage of that as well, because even after that, relationship got sorted and things happened and visits happened. But then, that is something that continues to haunt this relationship.
Right. Okay. There is a question from Gargi about whether there is a risk of another Nepalese civil war given the recent rise of factionalism in Nepal politics and within the Nepalese Communist Party and supposed rise of pro-monarchist forces and pro-India groups. Well, I'm not sure of the pro-monarchist forces because that's something the Rajavadis in Nepal at some point keep springing up and that conversation keeps happening. But I think it's a larger question around the kind of political uncertainty Nepal is witnessing and whether, it's witnesses political instability for decades now and whether it's slipping into another such phase.
Well, that is what some of the voices that comes out from Nepal, especially the academicians, the think tanks, is that there is always this risk of Nepal again slipping back into that era where there was a lot of civil tensions. But well, that's how I think Nepal has always worked out. But then the thing is, Nepal has also come out of it, and their internal political troubles never really sort of, I would say, spilled out. Right now, what we are seeing, changing dynamics in Nepal, right? On one hand, we are seeing the split in the Communist Party. We are seeing the opposition, the Nepali Congress. They are also, they are also strengthening themselves, especially after the dissolution of the lower house of the parliament. And we are also seeing royalists, I mean, pro-monarchists, who are now calling and making this call that the Raja should come back, because it was when the Raja was there, the monarchy was there was a lot of stability. But having said that, it's also true that Nepal knows how to ward off this kind of tensions. I don't think they will slip into a kind of a civil war kind of a thing, but they would really work it out. They have a strong constitution if they really abide by it. Although this time people are saying that Prime Minister Oli had violated some of the provisions of the constitution by suddenly, going for the dissolution of the lower house of the parliament. But I think all this will be worked out. There are elections coming up. If the elections, and for all you know, what the Supreme Court comes up with a verdict, that can also change things there.
Right. Okay, there's a question from Abhijit. India has asked Nepal to undo the map before further consultations. What is Nepal thinking about it?
Well, we have not really heard that from the official channels at all. Not in the the statements that were made publicly by the Minister of External Affairs. That is something it's something that was never really talked about except for a few media reports. But India has not gone ahead and publicly stated that. Had that been the case, when Foreign Secretary Harshingla went there, or even now in the Joint Commission meeting, things of that matter has not been told and talked about, because India has made it clear at the very beginning itself, when this row started in May, June, that they reject the map, and they reject also the what they call as artificial enlargement of Nepal's territory.
Right. Okay. So I'll take one last question. This is from Rajat, and this is, actually a very apt question to close with, because this is the big looming factor, the elephant in the room, as it were. Is it true that China is manipulating Nepal's policies and trying to overthrow the democracy? Now, we've talked about it in earlier episodes of Government Matters as well, but did this conversation, at all spring up in the recent meeting between the two foreign ministers?
Well, if you go by, I mean, as per the sources, our Indian government sources that I've spoken to, and also Foreign Minister Gewali's public speeches, it was very clear that the map and boundary issues came up, and it was also clear that they will not be discussing China, because this is about bilateral relationship, a relationship that has, been a very rich and a friendly relationship for decades. And to put it in the words what Foreign Minister Gewali had stated, is that they see both these neighbors, both these large neighbors, as very important neighbors. Both have importance for them. They need India as much as they need China. So that's what the public position is. Having said that, it's true that China is now doing a lot of interference in Nepal. It is trying to unite these two squabbling factions, which they did even last year also. So they are now meddling in their internal politics. So the fact that and we've seen that, and these things are public, that the Chinese Communist Party has run workshops even in Nepal, workshops on how to have governance models, modules on how to run the government and how to stay united. We've seen a Chinese ambassador to Nepal doing a lot of hectic meetings with leaders from both the sides of both the the factions to keep them united together. So we do see a lot of interference is happening. At the same time, India is aware of all of that, but it is ultimately Nepal's call. What is it that they want? What they state publicly is that both are important neighbors and they would need the help and cooperation of both these neighbors for their own development.
Right. Okay, so Nayanima, thank you so much. We have a few questions left, but unfortunately, we are running out of time. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for sending in your questions for government matters. Do keep subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can like our Facebook page. You can follow us on Twitter, and of course, visit our website, theprint.in.